Move on. Let's talk about weather. We've got Scott Peccariello, who is the founder and CEO at Weather Optics. He's coming to us from Brooklyn, New York. Scott, how are you doing today?
Hey, good to be here. How are you guys?
Doing great. Did I butcher your last name, or am I right?
You got it. It's a tough one. It's Pecorello. It's a little the eyes a little deceiving, but you got it. You got it right.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful, man. So let's talk about forecasting and the disruption, or weather, forecasting the weather and its disruption to trucking. What are you guys doing there at Weather Optics?
Yeah, so Weather Optics is all about translating weather data, right? So instead of giving you just a weather forecast, we're translating these insights to make it really easy for truckers, shippers to understand how weather is going to impact their future operations.
And looking at that, so, especially for carriers and stuff, the reliability of the, forecasts, how important is that for some of these carriers that are out on the road? Because I know in some conditions, even up on I-80 with 70 mile per hour wind gust, it can get a little crazy. So are there any challenges or anything you've run across as you all have been putting it together?
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously the further you go out in the forecast, the more difficult it is to predict exactly what weather conditions are going to happen. But our forecasts are really accurate in the short range and the medium range. So even for these kind of high extreme weather events like the high winds, the snow in higher elevations, our data and data in general in the weather space is actually really accurate within about a 48-hour period. And within about 3 to 4 days, you get a really good signal. So it's important for carriers, shippers, anyone who's moving goods from point A to point B to leverage some kind of weather software, whether it's for safety or for ETAs. The weather data can definitely make a difference as you're planning your operations.
Yeah, so that's a great point, Scott, because, I was one of those guys back in the day who would say, well, heck, the Weather Channel's on 57 TVs in a brokerage house, right? So why do I need when do we need this? But you need that detail in there. Can you speak to that? Why you need that actual detail down to the ground level?
Yep. Well, something really important is route-based insights, right? So it's one thing to know at origin and destination that there's going to be some amount of snow, but what's really important is what's happening in between, right? And then being able to translate that into something that makes sense. So, an example we always like to give is there's a really big difference between 3 inches of snow in Chicago and 3 inches of snow in Atlanta, right? In Chicago, they'll be fine with that kind of weather. In Atlanta, the whole city might shut down. So having a source that goes beyond just giving you the raw weather data and also having it route-based is super important, and it really allows you to be proactive instead of reactive, and that's really what we're working on at Weather Optics.
And looking at route-based ETA, so is that kind of where you're seeing predictively 24, 48, 72 hours in advance? You can almost send a pre-notification saying, hey, delays along the route, here's the potential downtime. Is that kind of what we're looking at, and then proactively getting ahead of it versus waiting until it occurs?
Exactly. Yep. So we're basically just giving you a percent slowdown of your shipment at Weather Optics, and then we're the only company right now to do this, where we're able to tell you that, hey, on this route ahead, there's going to be a 17% slowdown, and it's going to be because rain and wind. And so it allows you to plan 3, 4, 5 days in advance and say, what, this shipment should really be moved back or pushed up, and here's what the actual ETA is going to be.
So, Scott, I'm interested in what the other data is that you bring in. So you bring in weather data, you bring in other data as well to kind of get these risk scores and bring them together. What is some of that other data? Is it like, well, it hasn't rained in 2 weeks in Chattanooga, so people forgot how to drive when it rains, and therefore it's going to slow, which seems like what happens sometimes, right? So what is that
Yes.
other data?
That's really interesting, because we do have somewhat of like a social score, right? So some of our data is actually rating different locations and seeing how equipped they are to handle different weather conditions. So that's one input that's kind of non-weather. We look at some really crazy variables like tree height and density, distance from river, actual telematics data from vehicle historically. So we marry all of this data together to basically give you this forecast of here's how disruptive weather is going to be at this particular location, at this particular time, and for this particular type of vehicle.
Interesting. I wonder if traffic actually speeds up in your data in Miami, because when I lived there, when it rained, everybody drove faster because they knew 100 yards down the line it was going to be sunny, right? Because you have those small microbursts, right? Exactly. Rain would actually speed up traffic at times. You guys got a partnership that you've just come across. Is that correct? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So last week we announced a partnership with Descartes, which is really exciting for us. And specifically Descartes MacroPoint and their capacity platform. So all of our risk scores, which include our road conditions index, flood index, life and property index, business disruption index, All of that will be accessible through the Descartes platform and on a lane-by-lane basis. So for freight brokers who are looking to plan loads, they're able to look at our risk scores out to 7 days and see, hey, for this particular lane, this is what the risk score is. And so maybe you want to take that lane or you want to take a different load. And it really allows you to optimize and increase your efficiency. And so we're really excited about this partnership.
Well, I think that could be very useful as well, just because coming from a brokerage and operations, half the battle is you encounter these weather events.
Sure.
And if you get ahead of it with a customer, you could adjust your, if you have a high risk score, well, maybe I need to talk to the receiver and say, hey, there's something that's going on.
Manage expectations
Exactly.
with your customers and let them know what's going on. We talk from this as a perspective of the brokerage, the fleet manager, the owner, operator, driver needing to know all this information. But this is really essential for shippers to plan their supply chains as well, no, Scott?
Absolutely, yeah. We work with a number of shippers. It increases their ability to communicate with customers, with their own carriers. So it's certainly important for anyone who's moving goods from point A to point B. And again, we work with a number of shippers, particularly meal kit delivery companies who are really worried about, spoiled goods and things like that. So it's definitely important and good information for them to have as well.
And looking into models, I remember we talked about if you're looking at hurricanes, there's like the European model, the American model. Do you guys utilize any previous models, or are you building a entirely new model based on the data and the analytics?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have a whole team dedicated to our weather engine. And we basically blend a mix of these proprietary models. So some of the ones that you mentioned, in addition to some other ones, and then we add some machine learning bias correcting on top of it. So really just trying to optimize kind of what's already available to us and make a really accurate forecast in the short, medium, and long term, and really focusing, on each individual kind of time frame to make sure we're optimizing performance.
So I'm interested, Scott, have you run across any anomalies out there, or interesting things about weather as you study this and you go through this stuff? Like, there's a thing around here called the Chattanooga effect. And it's a very real thing, I assure you, where storms come across that plateau and they'll just evaporate, specifically right before they get to my yard in the summertime. And then they'll re-engineer themselves on the other side of it. Have you come across interesting things like that?
Definitely. There's some really interesting patterns, and we have a ton of historical data, so we're able to look at these kind of trends over time. One really notable one is the severe weather. You have Tornado Alley, right, out in the Midwest and the plains. A lot of that is actually shifting to the east, so we're seeing less tornadoes and severe storms in places like Oklahoma and in some of the plain states, and more tornadoes and storms in places like New Jersey and Pennsylvania. So that's a really big and interesting shift. We're seeing it again this year. This last couple of weeks, southeastern Pennsylvania has been getting rocked by storms, and we think that trend's going to continue. So areas in the east might be the new storm or tornado alley in the next couple of years.
Wow.
And final question here while we have you on. What would the best way to reach out to you all, or if folks are interested in getting more information, how should they reach out?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go over to weatheroptics.co. You can find me on LinkedIn at Scott Pecorello, Twitter, anything like that. Reach out to us. We'll be happy to talk about the weather.
Excellent stuff. Thank you so much, Scott. The I is silent in Pecorello, by the way. Thank you so much.
You guys.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. It's really interesting because, we've talked about that before down here, right? That tornadoes seem to be coming our way more.
Oh, yeah. They got to come up through the valley, too. You got to watch out. Not over the ridge.
Not over the ridge. It's up the valley.
Alabama tornadoes, even their football team and their tornadoes. I can't win.
You can't win as a fall. You just can't win. Hey, excellent stuff. We'll be right back after this short break.